The old man's hands trembled as he held the photograph. Not from age, though 93 years had weathered his fingers like fence posts left too long in Wyoming wind. The trembling came from memory, from the weight of a story he'd carried for nearly 6 decades pressed against his ribs like a stone. Daniel Crawford sat on the porch of the ranch house his grandfather had built in 1867, watching November snow dust the eastern hills. Beside him, his grandson Jacob shifted in his marine dress blues, the fabric still stiff and new. 21 years old. The same age Dan had been when he'd first kissed Kate beneath the cottonwood tree down by Silver Creek. The daguerreotype photograph was faded now, the silver oxidized to ghostly gray, but Dan could still see every detail. A man of 37, dark hair and darker eyes standing rigid as a soldier. Beside him, a woman with auburn hair, pulled back severe, her face beautiful in the way of those who'd learned to hide fear behind dignity. A boy of 9 clutched her hand, and in her arms, wrapped in the christening gown Kate had sewn before she died a baby girl. 1897. The year everything changed. "Grandpa," Jacob said, his voice careful the way young men speak to the old when they're afraid of the answer. "You never talk about how you met Grandma Emma." Dan closed his eyes, heard the wind through the porch boards, the same wind that had blown the day she'd stepped off that train. The same wind that had carried Kate's last breath 8 months before Emma arrived. "Your generation thinks you invented second chances." Dan's voice came out rougher than he'd intended. "Let me tell you about real courage." Jacob leaned forward, elbows on knees. In 48 hours, he'd be on a ship to Korea. The war had ended in armistice 6 months ago, but someone still had to stand on that border and make sure it held. Dan knew about borders, about the lines men draw and the prices they pay to defend them. "They said I let my wife die." The words came out flat, factual, the way a man describes weather. "And for 8 months I believed them." The wind picked up, rattling the barn door Dan had been meaning to fix for 3 years. Some things you never get around to. Some things you carry until you can't carry them anymore, and then you hand them to someone young enough to bear the weight. It was December of 1895. I was 35. My boy Harry was 7, and my wife Kate, Dan's throat closed around her name the way it still did even now. Kate had been gone 8 months. Fever took her in April, spring fever they called it, killed half the children in the county and took the mothers who nursed them. Jacob said nothing. Good. The boy was learning that some stories required silence. That day at Silver Creek Station, the woman stepped off the 3 o'clock train from the east. She didn't have anything but a carpet bag with a broken clasp and $11 to her name. Her name was Emma Grace Hartwell. Dan looked at the photograph again, at Emma's face caught forever in that moment of fragile hope before life taught her what hope cost. "She saved my life, Jacob, saved Harry's life, saved this whole family." He paused, feeling the old catch in his chest. And it wasn't some romantic story like you're thinking. It was a story about survival. The wind died. In the sudden stillness, Dan could hear his own heartbeat, slower now than it used to be, but still steady, still keeping time. "Let me tell you how it really happened." December 14th, 1895, Silver Creek Station, Wyoming Territory. The train screamed into the station like something dying. Metal on metal brakes, grinding steam, hissing white into air so cold it burned to breathe. Emma Grace Hartwell pressed her gloved hand against the frost-covered window of the third-class car and watched the platform materialize through the steam like something half-real. Silver Creek, Wyoming Territory. End of the line. End of everything she'd known for 25 years. She'd spent 18 days on this train. 18 days of wooden benches that bruised her spine, of strangers pressed too close, of bread gone hard and water gone stale. 18 days to travel from the textile mills of Massachusetts to this frozen edge of the world where a man she'd never met had promised her a new life. The train lurched to a stop. Emma's hand went automatically to her chest, feeling for her heartbeat through the layers of worn wool. Still there, still pounding, still keeping her alive, even when she wasn't sure she wanted to be. "Silver Creek," the conductor's voice boomed through the car. "End of the line, everybody off." Emma reached under the seat for her carpet bag. Everything she owned in the world fit inside. 2 dresses, both mended more times than she could count. Her mother's rosary, the beads worn smooth from a decade of desperate prayers. A hairbrush with a cracked handle. and 11 letters tied with a ribbon that had once been white but had gone gray from handling. 11 letters from William Montgomery. Respectable widower seeks honest woman for marriage, the advertisement had read. Must be willing to work. No questions asked about past. No questions asked. Those 3 words had been worth more than gold. Emma stood. Her legs had gone stiff from sitting, pins and needles shooting up from her feet. Around her, other passengers were already pushing toward the door. Families reuniting, businessmen in expensive coats adjusting their watches, a preacher clutching his Bible like a shield against the cold. They all had somewhere to be, someone waiting for them. Emma stepped into the aisle and let the crowd carry her toward the door. The cold hit her the moment her foot touched the platform. Not the gentle cold of a Massachusetts winter, the kind that nipped at your bone and made your breath cloud. This was something sharper, meaner. A cold that felt personal, like Wyoming territory itself was testing her right to be here. She pulled her thin shawl tighter. It didn't help. The platform was crowded despite the weather. Cowboys stomped their boots and blew on their hands. Women in heavy wool coats hurried toward waiting wagons, their breath trailing behind them like smoke. Children chased each other through the patches of snow, their laughter high and bright against the gray afternoon sky. But no one approached Emma. No one called her name. She stood perfectly still, her carpet bag clutched in both hands, and waited. Minutes passed, the crowd thinned. The train behind her hissed and groaned, preparing to leave. Still no one came. The station worker appeared at her elbow without warning. Young, maybe 20, with a patchy beard he probably thought made him look older. He had a broom in his hands and curiosity in his eyes. "You looking for someone, miss?" Emma's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Yes, I'm looking for Mr. William Montgomery. He was supposed to meet me here." Something flickered across the worker's face. Emma had spent 7 years reading the faces of factory supervisors and boarding house owners, learning to spot the lie before it was spoken. She saw it now. "Montgomery, you say?" He scratched at his beard, not meeting her eyes. "Can't say I've seen him today. Weather's been rough, though. Maybe he got held up." "Where might I find him? His address?" "Best ask at the general store. Miss Sarah Mitchell knows everybody in town." He walked away before Emma could ask anything else. She stood alone on the platform as the last passengers disappeared into the gray afternoon. The train whistle blew one long, mournful note. The locomotive began to move, taking with it her last connection to the world she'd left behind. Emma didn't watch it go. Instead, she looked down the main street of Silver Creek at the wooden building hunched against the cold, at the few people hurrying between them with their heads down and their collars up. And she began to walk. Mitchell's general store was warm, at least. A pot-bellied stove crackled in the corner, and the smell of coffee and tobacco hung thick in the air. Emma stepped inside and felt every eye in the room turned toward her. 3 men at a table near the window. An elderly couple examining bolts of fabric. A young mother with a baby on her hip. And behind the counter, a woman with steel gray hair and a gaze sharp enough to cut glass. That would be Sarah Mitchell. Emma approached the counter, keeping her spine straight and her chin up. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited attack. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm looking for Mr. William Montgomery. I was told you might know where to find him." The silence that followed was absolute. The men at the table stopped talking. The elderly couple exchanged a look. The young mother pulled her baby closer, as if Emma might contaminate them both just by standing there. Sarah Mitchell's eyes traveled slowly over Emma, taking in her worn dress, her thin shawl, her carpet bag with its broken clasp. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat as winter ice. "You're the mail-order bride." Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Emma Hartwell. Mr. Montgomery and I have been corresponding for several months. We were to be married upon my arrival." "Were you now?" One of the men at the table laughed, a short, ugly sound that made Emma's stomach clench. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Sarah Mitchell leaned forward on the counter. Emma saw something in her expression that might have been pity or might have been contempt. Sometimes they looked the same. "William Montgomery left Silver Creek 3 days ago, Miss Hartwell. Packed up everything he owned and headed for California." She paused, letting the words sink in like a knife. "He ain't coming back." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Emma's feet. "That's not possible." She heard herself say the words, heard how weak they sounded. "He sent me money for the train. He wrote..." He sent you money. The big man pushed back from the table and stood. He was massive with a belly that strained against his vest and small mean eyes. Well, ain't that something? William Montgomery sending money to anyone? Another man laughed. Probably stole it from the last woman he swindled. Emma's hands tightened on her carpet bag. I don't understand. What's to understand? The big man took a step toward her. Montgomery's a fraud, a con man. He does this every few months. Puts an ad in some eastern newspaper, finds some desperate woman willing to come west, then disappears before she arrives. He grins, showing tobacco-stained teeth. You ain't the first, sweetheart, and you won't be the last. The room was spinning now. Emma gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. But he wrote to me. He said he owned a ranch. He says a lot of things. Sarah's voice had softened just slightly, and somehow that was worse than the hardness. That's what men like him do. They say pretty words to lonely women, and then they take what they can get. Emma's throat was tight. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She'd spent every penny she had to get here. She'd burned every bridge, severed every connection, gambled everything on a stranger's promise. And it had all been a lie. What am I supposed to do? The words came out before she could stop them. Weak, pathetic. Exactly the kind of words that invited attack. The big man laughed again. That ain't our problem, miss, but I reckon a woman like you knows how to earn her keep. His eyes traveled over her body in a way that made her skin crawl. Pretty thing like you shouldn't have trouble finding work. Emma felt blood rush to her face. Shame, anger, terror. They mixed together until she couldn't tell them apart. That's enough, Bill. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway of the general store, snow-dusting the shoulders of his worn coat. He was tall, lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days. But it was his eyes that caught Emma's attention. They were brown, nearly black, and they held the kind of emptiness that came from losing something you could never get back. This ain't your concern, Sam, the big man said. Bill, his name was Bill. I'm making it my concern. The man called Sam stepped into the store, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Miss is clearly in distress. Seems to me the Christian thing to do is offer help, not insults. Bill's face reddened. You calling me unchristian, Crawford? I'm calling you a lot of things, Bill. Unchristian's the politest of them. For a moment, the air crackled with the promise of violence. Emma held her breath, watching the two men face each other across the length of the store. Then Bill laughed, forced, unconvincing. Ain't worth the trouble. Come on, boys. Let's get out of here before Crawford starts preaching about charity. The three men filed past Sam, each one careful not to meet his eyes. The elderly couple followed shortly after, murmuring apologies that weren't really apologies at all. The store fell quiet. Emma became aware that she was trembling, whether from cold or shock or fear, she couldn't tell. Sam Crawford turned to look at her, and in those dark, empty eyes she saw something else. Recognition. Not of her specifically, but of her situation, of what it meant to be alone and desperate and terrified. You're the woman Montgomery was supposed to marry, he said. Not a question. Yes, Emma's voice was barely a whisper, and you've got nowhere to go. Not a question either, she didn't answer. Couldn't. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and removed his hat, holding it against his chest in a gesture that felt almost old-fashioned. Respectful. My name's Daniel Crawford. I own a ranch about 10 miles east of here. My wife passed last winter. I've got a boy, Harry, who's 7, who needs looking after. He paused, choosing his next words with care. I ain't looking for anything improper, ma'am, but I need help with the house and the boy. I can offer room and board in exchange. It ain't much, but it's honest work. Emma stared at him. You don't know me. No, ma'am, I don't. You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone. I reckon you could. Her jaw tightened. Why would you help me? Sam's jaw worked. For the first time, emotion flickered across his face. Pain. Old pain worn smooth by time, but never fully healed. Because my wife would have wanted me to be, he said simply. She was the kind of woman who couldn't stand to see anyone suffer. Didn't matter who they were or where they came from. He paused. She's been gone 8 months now, and I've been failing at everything she asked me to be. Maybe this is a chance to do one thing right. Before Emma could respond, the store's door burst open. A small figure flew through the entrance. A boy, maybe 7 years old, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and panic written across his face. "Papa!" he screamed. "Papa, you got to come the barn!" And then the boy saw Emma. He stopped mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-breath. His eyes went wide. His face went pale. His whole body froze as if time itself had stopped. "Harry!" Sam's voice sharpened with concern. "Harry, what about the barn?" But Harry wasn't listening to his father. He was staring at Emma with an expression that made her blood run cold. It was the look of someone who'd just seen something impossible, something miraculous, something terrifying. "Mama," the word came out as a whisper. "Harry," Sam moved toward his barn, his voice strained. "Harry, that's not Mama." The boy launched himself across the store, moving faster than Emma thought possible. Before she could react, before she could speak, before she could do anything at all, Harry had thrown himself at her, his small arms wrapping around her waist with desperate strength. "Mama, Mama, Mama." He was sobbing now, his whole body shaking. "You came back. I knew you'd come back. I prayed every night, and you came back." Emma stood frozen, the boy clinging to her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted off its axis. "I'm sorry," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but I'm not." "You are." Harry looked up at her, and Emma saw his mother's ghost in his eyes, saw what this boy had lost, saw the crater it had left in his small soul. "You look just like her. You have the same hair, the same eyes. You even smell like her." Emma's chest was so tight she could barely breathe. She looked at Sam, desperate for help, and found him standing motionless, his face a mask of agony. "He does this," Sam said, his voice barely audible. "Sees her everywhere, in every woman who passes through town." He swallowed hard. "But he's never run to anyone before. He's never." Harry was still crying, still clutching Emma's dress with white-knuckled hands. "Don't go away again," the boy pleaded. "Please don't go away again. I'll be good. I'll be so good. I'll do all my chores, and I won't complain about eating vegetables and—" "Sweetheart." Emma's hands moved of their own accord, settling on the boy's thin shoulders. She could feel his bones through his shirt, could feel him trembling. "Sweetheart, look at me." Harry looked up, tears streaming down his face. "My name is Emma," she said gently. "Bamawa. Emma Grace Hartwell. I came here on a train today from very far away. I've never been to Wyoming before. I've never met you before." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm not your mama." Harry's face crumpled. "But you look like her." I know I do." Emma didn't know that. Not really, but something told her it was true. "But I'm not her. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For a long moment, Harry just stared at her. Emma watched the hope drain from his eyes like water from a broken cup, watched the devastation settle in its place. And then the boy did something that broke her heart completely. He didn't let go. He pressed his face against her dress and held on tighter. And when he spoke, his voice was so small she could barely hear it. "Can you stay anyway?" Emma's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. "Harry," Sam's voice was rough. "Harry, come here. Let Miss Hartwell go." "No." Harry's grip tightened. "No, Papa. Please, please let her stay. Please." "Harry, I know she's not Mama." The boy's voice cracked. "I know, but she's nice, Papa. She didn't push me away. She didn't laugh at me like Mrs. Crawford did. She talked to me like I mattered." He looked up at Emma, his face streaked with tears and snot and desperate hope. "Please, please, can she come home with us, just for a little while?" Emma's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. She looked at Sam and found him looking back at her. And in that moment, something passed between them. Something unspoken but understood. They were both broken. They were both lost. And somehow this small boy had found a way to tether them together. "Ma'am," Sam's voice was formal, careful. "I made you an offer before my son interrupted. I want you to know that offer still stands. No more, no less than what I said. Room and board for honest work. Nothing improper expected or wanted." Emma should have refused. She knew that. Every instinct she'd developed over years of surviving on her own told her to run, to get out of this situation before it became more complicated than she could handle. But Harry was still clinging to her dress, and Sam was looking at her with eyes that had seen the same darkness she knew. And somewhere outside, the snow was falling harder, and she had $11 to her name and nowhere in the world to go. "All right," she heard herself say. "I'll come with you." Harry's face transformed. The grief didn't disappear. It was still there lurking beneath the surface. But something else joined it, something that looked dangerously like hope. "Thank you," Sam said quietly. "I'll get the wagon. We should leave before the storm gets worse." He settled his hat back on his head and walked toward the door. But before he reached it, he paused and looked back at his son. "Harry," he said gently, "you need to let Miss Hartwell go now." Harry hesitated. Then slowly, reluctantly, he released his grip on Emma's dress. But he didn't step away. He stood right beside her, close enough that his shoulder brushed against her hip. "Can I hold your hand?" he asked. "Just until we get to the wagon." Emma looked down at this small wounded boy who'd just called her mama in front of a store full of strangers, who'd clung to her like she was his last hope in a world that had already taken too much from him. She should say no, should establish boundaries, should protect both of them from the inevitable pain that was coming. Instead, she held out her hand. Harry's fingers wrapped around hers, small and cold and trusting. And Emma felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been locked away for a very long time. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's go home." The wagon ride was quiet. Sam sat at the front, handling the reins with the ease of long practice. Emma sat behind him on a bench made soft with blankets that smelled faintly of wood smoke and leather. Harry pressed against her side like a small, warm shadow. The boy hadn't let go of her hand since they'd left the store. Emma watched the town of Silver Creek disappear behind them, swallowed by snow and distance. She thought about William Montgomery, the man who'd promised her a new life and delivered her into humiliation instead. She thought about the money she'd spent on train fare. Money she'd saved for 3 years penny by penny, dream by dream. Borrowed from the factory supervisor who'd let her go with a knowing smile and a pat on the shoulder that had lingered too long. She thought about the faces of the people in that store, the contempt, the pity, the mean-spirited glee of Bill and his friends who'd looked at her like she was something to be used up and thrown away. And then she thought about Sam Crawford, who'd stepped between her and that cruelty without asking for anything in return, who'd offered her shelter because his dead wife would have wanted him to, who was carrying his own grief like a stone around his neck and somehow still found room to help a stranger. "Miss Emma," Harry's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Yes. Are you bad?" Emma looked down at the boy's upturned face. His eyes were still red from crying, but there was something else in them now, concern. For her. "A little," she admitted, "because the man you were supposed to marry wasn't there." "Yes." Harry was quiet for a moment, processing this. "I'm glad he wasn't there." Emma blinked. "Why?" "Because if he was there, you would have married him, and then you couldn't come home with us." The simple logic of it, the child's faith that everything happened for a reason. It made Emma's chest ache. "Harry," she said carefully, "you know I'm not staying forever, right? I'm going to help out for a little while, until I can figure out what to do next." Harry's hand tightened around hers. "I know," he said, but his voice said something different. His voice said he was already planning ways to make her stay. Emma didn't have the heart to argue. The Crawford Ranch appeared through the snow like a promise. It was modest, a 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a barn that needed painting, a chicken coop, a fence that listed slightly to one side. Everything about it said working family, said honest labor, said this is what we built with our own hands. But there was something else too, something Emma noticed the moment the wagon pulled into the yard. The curtains in the windows hung crooked. The garden was buried under snow, but she could see the dead stalks of plants that hadn't been harvested before the frost. A child's toy, a wooden horse, lay abandoned on the porch steps, half covered in white. This was a house that had stopped being tended, a home that had lost its heart. Sam pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down without a word. He came around to help Emma, offering his hand with that same formal courtesy he'd shown in the store. "It ain't much," he said, and for the first time she heard something like shame in his voice. "House needs work. Everything needs work. I've been, I haven't been able to keep up. It's fine, Emma said, and she meant it. After the boarding houses she'd lived in, after the factory dormitories with their thin walls and thinner mattresses, this place looked like a palace. Harry jumped down from the wagon and grabbed Emma's hand again, tugging her toward the house. Come on, I want to show you my room and the kitchen. Mama used to make the best biscuits in the kitchen. Do you know how to make biscuits? Papa tries, but they always come out like rocks. He says Mama took the recipe with her to heaven and won't share. Harry, Sam's voice was gentle but firm. Let Miss Hartwell catch her breath. She's had a long journey. Harry's face fell, but he nodded and released Emma's hand. Sorry, he mumbled. It's all right, Emma said. She reached out and touched his shoulder lightly. I'd love to see your room. Just give me a few minutes to warm up first, okay? The smile that spread across Harry's face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Okay, I'll go get ready. I'll clean up my toys and everything. He raced toward the house boots pounding on the snow-covered steps. The door banged shut behind him. Emma and Sam stood alone in the yard. He gets attached, Sam said quietly. Too quick, too deep. His mama was the same way. He paused, his jaw tightening. I should warn you, he's going to test your limits. He's going to push and push, trying to see if you'll leave, trying to make you prove you are not going anywhere. And what should I do when that happens? Sam turned to look at her. In his eyes, she saw the weight of 8 months of solo parenting, of trying to be enough when he'd never felt like enough, even when his wife was alive. I don't know, he admitted. I've been failing that test since the day she died. Emma studied this man, this stranger who'd rescued her from humiliation and was now confessing his failures like they were sins he needed to atone for. Why did you really offer to help me? She asked. And don't tell me it's because your wife would have wanted it. That's part of it, but it's not all of it. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Because you didn't flinch, he said finally. What? In the store, when Bill was saying those things to you, when everyone was staring. Sam's voice was low, rough. You didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't beg. You just stood there and took it like you'd taken worse and survived. Emma felt something cold move through her chest. That's not strength. That's just practice. Maybe. Sam settled his hat lower on his head. But I've seen people break under less, seen them give up, give in, let the world grind them down until there's nothing left. He met her eyes. You didn't break, and I reckon I needed to see that someone could take a hit and stay standing, because most days I ain't sure I can do it myself. The honesty of it stunned her. Before she could respond, the front door burst open again. Miss Emma, Harry's voice was urgent. Come quick. The fire in the stove went out, and it's so cold in here. Emma looked at Sam. Something passed between them. Not understanding, not yet. But the beginning of something. The acknowledgement that they were both standing at the edge of the same cliff, both afraid of falling, both too tired to walk away. We should go inside, Emma said. Yeah. Sam picked up her carpet bag from the wagon. We should. They walked toward the house together, their breath making clouds in the frozen air. And as Emma stepped across the threshold, leaving the cold behind, she allowed herself one small, dangerous thought. Maybe this could work. Maybe she'd finally found a place to belong. She didn't know then, couldn't know, that William Montgomery wasn't gone at all. That he was watching this ranch from the hills above town, making plans that would test everything she thought she knew about survival. She didn't know that the real fight was just beginning. All she knew was that a small boy's hand had found hers again in the darkness of the house. And for the first time in years, she didn't want to let go. The fire took 3 attempts to light. Emma's fingers were numb, clumsy from cold, but she refused to let Sam see her struggle. She'd spent 10 years lighting stoves in factory dormitories and boarding houses. She wasn't about to be defeated by a cast-iron stove in Wyoming. The kindling finally caught. Flames licked up through the wood, throwing shadows across the kitchen walls. Harry cheered from the doorway. See, Papa, I told you she could do it. Sam said nothing. He stood by the kitchen table watching Emma with an expression she couldn't read. Not suspicion exactly. Something closer to disbelief. As if he'd forgotten that competence existed in the world. The wood box is nearly empty, observed, straightening up. Is there more in the barn? I'll fetch it. Sam reached for his coat. Harry, show Miss Emma where things are. And don't be a pest. I know, Papa. Harry grabbed Emma's hand and tugged. Come on, I'll show you Mama's kitchen. The words hit Emma like a fist to the chest. Mama's kitchen. Not the kitchen, not our kitchen. Mama's. Everything in this house still belonged to a ghost. Harry pulled her through the doorway, chattering about which drawer held the spoons and where his mama kept the sugar and how the pantry door stuck if you didn't lift it just right. Emma listened, nodded, filed away each piece of information, but her eyes were cataloging something else entirely. Dust on every surface. Dishes piled in the sink crusted with food that had been there for days. A pot on the stove with something burned black at the bottom, cobwebs in the corners. A child's drawing tacked to the wall, its edges curling with age. 8 months. Sam had said his wife died 8 months ago. This house hadn't been cleaned in at least that long. And this is where Mama kept her recipe book, Harry was saying, pulling open a drawer. See, she wrote everything down so she wouldn't forget, but she never needed to look. She knew all the recipes by heart. He held up a small leather journal, its pages soft with use. Emma took it carefully, reverently, as if it might crumble in her hands. Can I look at this? Sure, maybe you can make her biscuits. Papa says they're impossible without Mama, but maybe you could do it. You look like her. Maybe you cook like her, too. Emma opened the journal. The handwriting inside was neat and precise, each recipe accompanied by small notes in the margins. Sam likes extra butter. Harry won't eat raisins. Add a pinch of cinnamon. Don't tell anyone. These weren't just recipes. They were love letters. Messages from a woman who'd expected to cook these meals for decades, not knowing her time was running out. Emma closed the journal gently. I'll try. I can't promise they'll be as good as your mama's, but I'll try. Harry's smile could have lit the whole house. The back door banged open. Sam appeared with an armload of firewood, his eyes going immediately to the journal in Emma's hands. She found Mama's recipes, Harry announced. She's going to make biscuits. Sam's jaw tightened just slightly. Just enough for Emma to notice. That's so, he said. If you don't mind, Emma said, setting the journal on the counter carefully. I thought I might make supper tonight. Give you both a proper meal. You don't have to. I want to. Emma met his eyes. You offered me a job, Mr. Crawford. Let me do it. Something flickered in Sam's expression. Respect, maybe, or relief. All right, he said. I'll get more wood. He was gone before she could respond. Harry tugged at her sleeve. Papa's always like that. Mama used to say he had more feelings than words. Said he kept everything locked up inside like a bank vault. Your mama sounds like she was very wise. She was. Harry's voice went small. She was the wisest person in the whole world. The first week passed in a blur of work. Emma attacked the house like it was an enemy to be conquered. She scrubbed floors until her knuckles bled. She washed windows until they sparkled. She beat rugs and aired linens and organized cupboards and cleared away 8 months of accumulated grief. Sam watched her with a mixture of gratitude and something that looked almost like guilt. You don't have to work so hard, he said one evening, finding her on her hands and knees scrubbing the kitchen floor. I didn't hire you to kill yourself. I'm not killing myself. Emma sat back on her heels, pushing hair from her face. I'm fixing things. There's a difference. Is there a the question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Neither of them was ready to address. Emma returned to scrubbing. The pantry needs restocking. I made a list. Is there a day you go to town for supplies? Saturday, usually. I'll come with you. See if anyone in Silver Creek is hiring for sewing work. I'm good with a needle. Might be able to bring in some extra income. Sam's expression darkened. You don't need extra income, room and board. That was the deal. And I appreciate it, but I won't be a burden longer than I have to be. You're not a burden. The words came out fierce, almost angry. Emma looked up startled. Sam's hands were clenched at his sides. His jaw was tight. Sorry, he said after a moment. I didn't mean to. He took a breath. Kate always said I had a temper like summer lightning. Comes out of nowhere, disappears just as fast. Kate, Emma said the name, carefully testing it. That was her name. Yeah, Sam's voice softened. Catherine Ann Crawford, most beautiful woman I ever saw. Walked into Mitchell's General Store 15 years ago and I forgot how to talk. Just stood there staring like a damn fool until Sarah Mitchell threw a dish rag at my head. Emma felt something shift in her chest. Not jealousy. She had no claim on this man's heart. But something, longing maybe, for the kind of love he was describing. How did you finally talk to her? Didn't. A ghost of a smile crossed Sam's face. She talked to me, walked right up bold as brass and said, "You going to stand there catching flies, or are you going to offer to carry my packages?" He shook his head. Nearly swallowed my own tongue. She sounds brave. Bravest person I ever knew. The smile faded, right up until the end. Emina stopped scrubbing. What happened, if you don't mind my asking? Sam was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. Fever came through last winter. Bad one. Half the territory was laid up with it. Kate caught it first, probably from nursing the Henderson kids when their ma got sick. He paused. She was fine for a few days. Then she wasn't. How long? 5 days. Sam's hands opened and closed. 5 days from the first cough to the last breath. Doc Hartley came out twice, but there wasn't anything to do. She just faded, like a candle burning down. Emma thought of her own mother coughing blood into a handkerchief, growing thinner and grayer, until she simply stopped existing. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know those words don't help, but I'm sorry." Harry was with her at the end. Sam's voice cracked. "I'd gone to the barn to check on a sick calf. Wasn't gone more than 20 minutes. When I came back..." He stopped, swallowed hard. He won't talk about it. What happened while I was gone. What she said to him. He just shuts down whenever I ask. Emma's heart broke all over again. Maybe he's not ready. Maybe. Sam looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the full weight of his guilt. Or maybe he blames me for not being there, for letting him face it alone. He was with her. She wasn't alone. That matters, Sam. That matters more than anything. The use of his first name surprised them both. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crawford. I shouldn't have..." "Sam's fine." His voice was rough. "Mr. Crawford was my father, and he was a mean old bastard who beat his sons for fun. I'd rather not carry his name any more than I have to." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Sam's stiffness, his formality, the way he held himself apart from everyone, even his own son. He'd been taught that love came with fists. "Sam, then," Emma said softly, "and you can call me Emma." Their eyes met, something passed between them. Fragile, uncertain, but real. Then Harry's footsteps thundered down the stairs, breaking the moment. "Miss Emma, Papa, come quick. There's a man on a horse outside." Emma's blood went cold. She didn't know why. She had no reason to fear a stranger. But something in Harry's voice, something urgent and afraid, sent ice through her veins. Sam was already moving. He grabbed his rifle from above the door and checked that it was loaded. "Stay here," he told Emma. "Both of you." "Sam, stay here." He was out the door before she could argue. Emma grabbed Harry's hand and pulled him back from the window. But not before she caught a glimpse of the rider. Her heart stopped. She knew that horse. She knew that coat. She knew that self-satisfied posture, the way the man sat in the saddle like he owned everything he surveyed. William Montgomery hadn't gone to California after all. "Miss Emma," Harry's voice was scared. "Who is that man?" Emma couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up completely. Through the window, she watched Sam approach the rider. Watched them exchange words she couldn't hear. Watched William gesture toward the house, toward her with a smile that made her skin crawl. "Miss Emma, you're hurting my hand." She looked down. Her grip on Harry's fingers had turned white-knuckled. "Sorry." She forced herself to let go. "Sorry, sweetheart. Stay here, okay? Stay away from the windows." "But, please, Harry, just do this for me." Something in her voice must have communicated the seriousness, because Harry nodded and backed away from the window, pressing himself against the far wall. Emma moved to the door. Her hand was shaking as she reached for the handle. Outside, she could hear Sam's voice, low and dangerous. "Don't know what you're talking about. There's no woman here." "Come now, Mr. Crawford." William's voice was smooth as oil. "I saw the wagon tracks. I know she's here, and I must say I'm disappointed. I thought men of the West had a code of honor. Stealing another man's bride hardly seems honorable, does it?" "She ain't your bride. She ain't anyone's bride. She's my housekeeper, and you've got no claim on her. Ah, but that's where you're wrong. Emma heard papers rustling. I have a contract, signed by Miss Hartwell herself. She agreed to marry me in exchange for passage to Wyoming. She's taken my money and broken her word. In most courts, that's called breach of promise. Emma's stomach turned to ice. She hadn't taken his money. She'd paid for her own passage, borrowed every penny from the factory supervisor who'd let her go with that lingering touch. But William was holding papers, contracts she'd signed months ago before she knew what kind of man he was. I don't give a damn about your papers. Sam's voice was steel. Get off my land. This doesn't have to be unpleasant, Mr. Crawford. Just send the woman out. I'll take her off your hands and you can go back to your simple life. I said get off my land. A long pause. Emma held her breath. Very well. William's voice had lost its smoothness. Underneath was something cold, something dangerous. But this isn't over. That woman is mine by contract, and I always collect what's owed to me. Hoofbeats, receding into the distance. Emma's knees gave out. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, her whole body shaking. Miss Emma. Harry was beside her in an instant, his small hands on her face. Miss Emma, what's wrong? Who was that man? Why are you crying? She hadn't realized she was crying. The door opened behind her and Emma scrambled to her feet. Sam stood in the doorway, rifle still in his hands, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. That was William Montgomery, he said. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded. The man you were supposed to marry. Another nod. Sam's jaw tightened. He's got papers. Says you signed a contract. I did. Emma's voice came out as a whisper. Months ago, before I knew what he was, before I knew he'd done this to other women. Other women. That's what they said at the store, that he's done this before. Found women through advertisements, taken their money, then disappeared. Emma hugged herself. I didn't give him money. I swear to you, Sam. I paid my own way, but I don't have proof. Sam was quiet for a long moment. Emma watched his face, waiting for the accusation, waiting for him to tell her to leave, to take her problems with her, to stop dragging his family into her mess. Instead, he set the rifle back on its hooks and turned to face her. Doesn't matter. Emma blinked. What? Doesn't matter if you have proof or not. Doesn't matter what papers he's waving around. Sam's voice was hard as iron. You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. And I don't let anyone take what's mine. I'm not. You are, Sam cut her off. For as long as you're here, you're under my protection. And William Montgomery is going to learn real fast what happens when someone threatens my people. Emma stared at him. No one had ever protected her before. Not her mother, who'd been too sick to protect anyone. Not the factory supervisors who'd worked her half to death. Not the boarding house owners who'd looked the other way when men came sniffing around. She'd always protected herself. But now this man, this stranger she'd known for less than a week, was standing between her and danger, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Why? She asked. Sam frowned. Why what? Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why risk making an enemy of a man like Montgomery? For a long moment, Sam didn't answer. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face, made him look younger, made him look like the man he'd been before grief carved him hollow. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply, and because Kate would have had my hide if I did anything less. Harry, who'd been watching this exchange with wide eyes, suddenly threw himself at his father. I knew it, he crowed. I knew you'd protect her. You're a hero, Papa, like in the stories Mama used to tell. Sam caught his son lifting him up. I ain't a hero, Harry, just a man trying to do right. That's what heroes say. Harry squirmed around to look at Emma. See, I told you you're safe here. Papa won't let anyone hurt you. Emma looked at this man and this boy, her strange, broken, accidental family, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. But even as hope flickered to life in her chest, she knew this wasn't over. William Montgomery had promised to come back, and men like him always kept their promises. Saturday came too fast. Emma stood in front of Mitchell's Mercantile, her heart pounding against her ribs. She'd insisted on coming to town despite Sam's protests. She needed thread and fabric if she was going to start taking in sewing work. She needed to prove she could contribute. She needed to not be a coward. Sam had dropped her off with a warning. Don't let anyone get to you. Whatever they say, however they look at you, it's just words. They can't hurt you unless you let them. Easy for him to say. He hadn't spent his whole life being judged and found wanting. The bell above the door jingled as Emma entered. Sarah Mitchell looked up from behind the counter. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted, hardened. Mrs. Crawford's housekeeper, she said. Not Emma, not Miss Hartwell, just a label. Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. I need thread, please. White and brown. And whatever fabric you have, that's suitable for mending. Sarah didn't move to help her. Heard William Montgomery came by the Crawford place earlier this week. Emma's stomach tightened. News traveled fast in small towns. She'd forgotten that. Yes, ma'am. Heard Sam sent him away with a flea in his ear. Yes, ma'am. Sarah studied her for a long moment. Emma felt like a bug under glass. You know what people are saying, don't you? Emma lifted her chin. I can imagine. They're saying you've got Sam Crawford wrapped around your finger, that you set this whole thing up, the abandoned bride routine, to worm your way into a widower's house in his bed. The words hit like physical blows. Emma felt blood rush to her face. That's not true. Doesn't matter if it's true. Sarah's voice was flat. What matters is what people believe. And right now they believe you're a schemer who's taking advantage of a grieving man. Then people are wrong. Emma's voice shook, but she didn't look away. I didn't ask for any of this. I came here to marry William Montgomery because I had nowhere else to go. When he abandoned me, Sam offered me work, honest work, and I took it, that's all. Is it? Yes. Sarah was silent for a moment. Then unexpectedly she laughed. You've got spine, girl. I'll give you that. She reached under the counter and produced a bolt of brown fabric. Most women in your position would be crying by now, or lying through their teeth. I don't cry in public, and I'm a terrible liar. Sarah cut the fabric with quick, efficient strokes. Kate was the same way. Spine like an iron rod and no patience for dishonesty. She looked up. You really do look like her, you know. First time you walked in here, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Emma's throat tightened. Harry said the same thing. Poor child. Sarah's expression softened fractionally. He's been lost since she passed. Sam too, though he hides it better. She wrapped the fabric in brown paper. Threads on the shelf behind you. Help yourself. Emma selected the thread she needed and returned to the counter. When she reached for her money, Sarah held up a hand. Put it away. I can pay. I said put it away. Sarah's voice was firm. Consider it a welcome to Silver Creek. God knows you didn't get much of one last week. Emma didn't know what to say. She'd expected hostility, not kindness. Thank you, she managed. Sarah nodded curtly. Don't thank me yet. People in this town have long memories and longer tongues. You've got an uphill battle ahead of you, Miss Hartwell. Whether you climb it or fall is up to you. Emma tucked the package under her arm. I've been climbing uphill my whole life, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm not about to stop now. She was halfway to the door when Sarah's voice stopped her. Miss Hartwell. Emma turned. Sarah's expression was strange, almost reluctant. William Montgomery isn't a man to cross lightly. He's got friends in this town, important friends. If he decides to make trouble for you, she paused. Be careful, that's all I'm saying. Thank you for the warning. Wasn't a warning, just a fact. Sarah returned her attention to her ledger. Now get on home before people start talking more than they already are. Emma walked out into the winter air, her mind churning. Important friends. William had important friends in Silver Creek. Who? The sheriff, the banker, one of the ranchers. She was so lost in thought that she almost walked straight into the man blocking her path. Miss Hartwell. Emma's blood turned to ice. William Montgomery stood before her, his smile wide and dangerous. What a pleasant surprise, he said. I was just thinking about you. Emma took a step back. Stay away from me. Now, is that any way to greet your fiancé? William moved closer. We have unfinished business, you and I. Contracts to honor. Promises to keep. I'm not your fiancé. I never was. The papers say otherwise. William's smile didn't reach his eyes. And I'm a man who believes in the sanctity of legal documents. Aren't you? Emma's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, hiding them in the folds of her skirt. Sam Crawford told you to leave me alone. Sam Crawford is a dirt farmer with delusions of importance. William's voice hardened. He's nothing, less than nothing. And if he thinks he can steal what belongs to me, he's about to learn a very painful lesson. I don't belong to you. You signed a contract. Contracts can be broken. William laughed, a cold, ugly sound. Oh, Emma, sweet, naive Emma. He reached out and touched her face. She flinched away. You really think running to some pathetic widower is going to save you? William's voice dropped to a whisper. I've destroyed better women than you. Women with money, with connections, with families who tried to protect them. His eyes glittered. You have nothing. You're nothing, and when I'm done with you, everyone in this territory will know it. Is there a problem here? The voice came from behind Emma. Deep, dangerous, familiar. William's expression flickered, just for a moment. Then his smile returned smooth and false. Mr. Crawford, what a coincidence. Ain't no coincidence. Sam stepped forward, positioning himself between Emma and William. Saw your horse outside the mercantile. Figured you might be causing trouble. Trouble? I was simply having a conversation with my fiancée. She ain't your fiancée, and this conversation is over. William's smile tightened. You're making a mistake, Crawford. This woman is legally bound to me. I have documents. I don't care if you have the Constitution itself. Sam's voice was deadly calm. You come near her again, I'll put a bullet in you. That clear enough. The two men stared at each other. Emma could feel the tension crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Then William laughed softly. Very clear, Mr. Crawford. Very clear indeed. He stepped back, tipping at his hat. Good day to you both. I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again, soon. He walked away unhurried, confident. Emma waited until he disappeared around a corner before she let herself breathe. Thank you, she whispered. Sam's hand found hers, squeezed once. Let's go home. Home. The word wrapped around her like a blanket. She followed him to the wagon without looking back. But she could feel William's eyes on her watching, waiting, planning. And she knew with terrible certainty that this was only the beginning. 3 days passed without incident. Emma didn't trust it. She went through the motions of daily life. Cooking, cleaning, tending to Harry. But her eyes kept drifting to the windows. Her ears strained for hoofbeats. Every creak of the house made her heart stutter. William Montgomery was out there somewhere, watching, waiting, planning. You're wearing a hole in the floor. Emma jumped. Sam stood in the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable. Sorry. She forced herself to step away from the window. I can't seem to settle. Can't blame you for that. Sam moved past her to pour himself coffee. But jumping at shadows won't help. Man like Montgomery, he wants you scared. Don't give him the satisfaction. Easy to say when you're not the one he's hunting. Sam turned to face her. He's hunting both of us now. I made that clear when I told him to stay away from you. Emma's throat tightened. I'm sorry, I never meant to drag you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I stepped in of my own free will. Sam's voice softened. That's what neighbors do out here. We look out for each other. Is that what we are, neighbors? The question hung between them. Sam's eyes held hers for a long moment. I reckon we're something, he said finally. Not sure what yet, but something. Before Emma could respond, Harry came barreling down the stairs. Papa, Miss Emma, there's riders coming. 3 of them. Emma's blood went cold. Sam was already moving. He grabbed his rifle and checked the chamber in one smooth motion. Stay inside, he ordered. Both of you, lock the doors. Sam, lock the doors. He was gone before she could argue. Emma grabbed Harry and pulled him back from the window. Her hands were shaking, but she forced her voice to stay calm. Harry, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Can you do that? Harry nodded, his face pale. If something happens, if those men get into the house, I want you to run. Go out the back door, through the barn, and ride to town as fast as you can. Find Sheriff Blake and tell him what happened. But I can't leave you. Yes, you can. A month or... gripped his shoulders. Promise me, Harry. Promise me you'll run if things go bad. Harry's lower lip trembled. I promise. Good boy. She pulled him into a fierce hug. Good brave boy. Through the window, she watched Sam approach the three riders. They'd stopped at the edge of the property, close enough to see but far enough to claim they weren't trespassing. William wasn't among them. That terrified Emma more than if he'd been leading the charge. Sam's voice carried across the yard. Help you gentlemen with something. The lead rider, a big man with a scar across his cheek, tipped his hat. Just passing through, Mr. Crawford. No need for the rifle. I'll decide what there's need for. State your business. Like I said, just passing through. The man's eyes drifted to the house, to the window where Emma stood watching. Nice place you've got here. Shame if anything happened to it. Sam's rifle came up. That sounded like a threat. Did it? My apologies. The man smiled. A cold, ugly thing. Winters can be rough out here. Fires start easy. Barns burn. Sometimes people get hurt. He paused. Just an observation. Emma's hands clenched into fists. Get off my land, Sam said. We're on the road. Public property. The man's smile widened. But we'll be moving along. Got places to be. He tipped his hat again. Give our regards to Miss Hartwell. Mr. Montgomery sends his compliments. The three riders turned their horses and rode away at a leisurely pace. Sam watched them until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he walked back to the house, his jaw set like stone. Emma met him at the door. What do? We prepare. Sam's voice was grim. Those men were sending a message. Montgomery wants us scared. Wants us to know he can reach us whenever he wants. Can he? Sam didn't answer, which was answer enough. I should leave. The words tasted like ash in Emma's mouth. Take myself out of the equation. If I'm not here, no. Sam, be reasonable. I'm the one he wants. I said no. Sam grabbed her shoulders, his grip fierce. You run now, he wins. You spend the rest of your life running, and he spends the rest of his hunting. That's not living, Emma. That's barely surviving. At least you and Harry would be safe. We wouldn't be safe. We'd be complicit. Sam's eyes burned into hers. You think I could live with myself knowing I let a man like Montgomery drive an innocent woman from my home? You think Harry could after everything he's already lost? Emma's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I've always known what to do. Keep my head down, work hard, survive. But this? I don't know how to fight someone like him. You don't have to fight alone. Sam's grip gentled. That's what I've been trying to tell you. You've got me. You've got Harry. And whether you believe it or not, you've got this town. This town thinks I'm a schemer who seduced a widower. Some of them think that. Sam released her shoulders. Others are starting to see the truth. Sarah Mitchell told me what happened at the store. Said you stood up to her. Said you didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't lie. That counts for something in Silver Creek. Does it count enough to stop William Montgomery? Sam's jaw tightened. We're about to find out. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed staring at the ceiling, listening to every sound. The wind against the windows, the creak of settling wood, the distant howl of a coyote. And underneath it all, the memory of that scarred man's voice. Fires start easy, barns burn, sometimes people get hurt. She was still awake when she heard the footsteps. Soft, careful, coming from downstairs. Emma's heart stopped. She reached for the lamp beside her bed, then stopped herself. Light would give away her position. Instead, she slipped out of bed in the darkness, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. The footsteps moved through the kitchen, toward the stairs. Emma grabbed the poker from beside the cold fireplace in her room. It was heavy, solid, not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The footsteps started up the stairs. Emma pressed herself against the wall beside her door. Poker raised, 1 step, 2, 3. The door handle turned. Emma swung. Whoa! Sam caught the poker inches from his face, his eyes wide with shock. It's me, Emma. It's me! Emma's legs gave out. She would have collapsed if Sam hadn't caught her. I heard footsteps, she gasped. I know. Sam helped her sit on the edge of the bed. I was checking the locks, couldn't sleep either. Emma's whole body was shaking. She couldn't make it stop. Hey! Sam knelt in front of her, his hands on her knees. Hey, look at me. She looked. You're safe, he said. You're safe. I've got you. I almost hit you with a poker. Yeah, you did. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Good instincts. Emma laughed, a broken, hysterical sound that turned into a sob. Then another. Then she was crying. Really crying for the first time since her mother died. Sam didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her while she fell apart. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm sorry, I never… Shh. His hand stroked her hair. You don't have to apologize for being human. I'm so tired. The words came from somewhere deep inside her. I'm so tired of being strong all the time, of pretending everything's fine when nothing's been fine for years. Then stop pretending. Sam's voice was rough. At least with me. You don't have to be strong with me. Emma pulled back to look at him. In the darkness, she could barely make out his features, but she could feel the warmth of his breath, the solidness of his presence. Why? She whispered. Why do you care what happens to me? Sam was quiet for a long moment. Because you're the first person since Kate who's made me feel like there might be something worth waking up for. His voice dropped even lower. Because when I look at you, that I don't just see a woman who needs help. I see a woman who survived things that would have destroyed most people. And that makes me want to be stronger. Better. Worth something. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Sam, I know. He pulled away, putting distance between them. I know it's too soon. I know you've got enough to deal with without me adding to it. I needed you to know. In case something happens, I needed you to know that you matter to me, to Harry, to this family we're building. Family. The word wrapped around Emma's heart and squeezed. We're not a family. We're whatever we decide to be. Sam's eyes found hers in the darkness. That's the thing about starting over. You get to choose. Before Emma could respond, a scream split the night. Harry. They were both running before the echo died. Harry's room was at the end of the hall. Sam reached it first, slamming through the door with Emmy on his heels. The window was open, cold air poured in, and Harry was gone. No! Emma's scream tore from her throat. Sam was already at the window looking out into the darkness. Tracks, he said, his voice deadly calm. 2 sets of boot prints. They took him out through the window. Emma couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at Harry's empty bed, at the tangled blankets, at the wooden horse toy lying abandoned on the floor. Get dressed. Sam's voice cut through her paralysis. We're going after them. But now, Emma. 2 minutes later, she was dressed and downstairs. Sam had his rifle and his pistol, and he was shoving supplies into saddlebags with quick, efficient movements. They've got maybe 10 minutes on us, he said. Ground's frozen, but there's enough snow to track them. What if it's a trap? It is a trap. Sam's jaw was set like granite. But they've got my son. I don't have a choice. Emma grabbed his arm. Let me come with you. No, it's too dangerous. He took Harry to get to me. This is my fault. I have to. Emma. Sam turned to face her. If something happens to both of us, Harry's got nobody. I need you to stay here. I need you to ride to town and get Sheriff Blake. By the time I get to town and back. I know. Sam's voice cracked. But if I don't come back, if the worst happens, Harry's going to need someone. Someone who loves him. Can you do that? Can you promise me you'll take care of my boy if I can't? Emma was filled with tears. I promise. Sam nodded once. Then before she could react, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was brief, fierce, desperate. Stay alive, he said against her lips. That's an order. Then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness on horseback. Emma stood in the doorway watching until she couldn't see him anymore. Then she ran for the barn. She wasn't going to town. She was going to find Harry. Emma had lied to Sam and she didn't feel guilty about it. Harry was her responsibility. Her fault. If William had taken him to get to her, then she was going to be the one to get him back. She wasn't much of a rider. Hadn't been on a horse more than a handful of times in her life. But she managed to saddle the gentlest mare in Sam's stable and point her in the direction of the tracks. The moon was bright enough to see by, and the boot prints were clear in the snow. Two sets like Sam had said, one smaller than the other. Harry had been walking, not carried. That meant he was conscious. Unhurt, maybe. Emma pushed the mare faster. The tracks led east toward the mountains, away from town, away from help, into territory Emma didn't know. She'd been riding for maybe 20 minutes when she heard it. A voice, high and frightened. Harry. Emma dismounted and tied the mare to a tree. Then she moved forward on foot, staying low, using the trees for a cover. She crested a small rise and saw them. A cabin, small, run down, probably an abandoned trapper shelter. Light flickered through the cracks in the shuttered windows. And standing guard outside, rifle in hand, was one of the men from earlier, the one with the scar. Emma's mind raced. Sam would be tracking the main trail. He'd find the cabin eventually, but eventually might be too late. She needed a distraction. Moving carefully, she circled around to the back of the cabin. There was no guard here. They probably figured they were safe this far from civilization. They'd figured wrong. Emma found a window with broken shutters. Through the gap, she could see inside. Harry sat on a wooden chair, his hands tied behind his back. His face was streaked with tears, but his chin was up. Defiant. William Montgomery stood over him, talking in a low voice Emma couldn't quite hear. Her blood boiled. She looked around for anything she could use. A rock, a stick, something. Her hand closed around a rusted horseshoe half buried in the snow. Not much, but enough to cause trouble. Emma took a deep breath, said a prayer to whatever God might be listening, and threw the horseshoe at the cabin's front wall. It struck with a loud clang. "What the hell?" The guard's voice. Footsteps crunching through snow, moving toward the sound. Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed a rock from the ground, climbed through the broken window, and dropped into the cabin. William spun around. "You," Emma threw the rock. It caught him square in the forehead. He staggered backward, cursing, blood streaming down his face. "Miss Emma," Harry's voice was pure joy. "You came?" "I came." Emma was already behind him, working at the knots binding his hands. "Hold still, sweetheart. I've got you." "Behind you," Harry screamed. Emma turned just in time to see William lunging for hers. She dodged, but not fast enough. His fist caught her shoulder, sending her sprawling. "You miserable little witch!" William's face was a mask of blood and fury. "You've ruined everything." Emma scrambled backward. "Harry, run. I'm not leaving you. Go find your papa." Now, Harry hesitated for one agonizing second. Then he ran, his small body shooting through the cabin door, and into the darkness. William made a grab for him, but missed. "Jenkins!" he roared. "Get the boy!" The guard's voice came from somewhere outside. "Boss, I think there's someone else out here." A gunshot split the night. William froze. Emma's heart stopped. Then Sam's voice rang out clear and cold. "Next one goes through your head. Both of you drop your weapons and get on the ground." William's face contorted with rage. But he wasn't stupid. He raised his hand slowly. "This isn't over, Crawford." "Yeah, it is." Sam appeared in the doorway, rifle trained on William's chest. Behind him, the guard lay face down in the snow, hands behind his head. "Harry, you okay?" "I'm okay, Papa." Harry's voice came from somewhere behind his father. "Miss Emma saved me." She threw a rock at the bad man's head. Despite everything, Emma felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in her throat. Sam's eyes found hers. "You were supposed to go to town." "I lied." I noticed. Something flickered in his expression, not anger, something warmer. "We'll talk about that later." "Looking forward to it," William sneered. "How touching. The dirt farmer and his mail-order bride. You think this changes anything? I have friends, lawyers, connections that reach all the way to the territorial governor. You can't touch me." "Maybe not." Sam's voice was ice. "But Sheriff Blake can. And after tonight, you've given him plenty of reason to trun." As if summoned by his name, the sound of multiple horses reached Emma's ears. Sheriff Thomas Blake appeared moments later, flanked by 4 deputies. "Got your son's message," the sheriff said to Sam. "Boy rode into town screaming bloody murder. Woke up half the population." His eyes moved to William. "Mr. Montgomery, can't say I'm surprised to find you here." "This is a misunderstanding, Sheriff. These people attacked me." "Save it." Sheriff Blake's voice was flat. "We've got 4 other women in this territory who'll testify to your misunderstandings. Been building a case against you for months. Tonight just gave me the excuse I needed. William's face went pale. You can't arrest me. My lawyer can meet you in my jail. The sheriff nodded to his deputies. Take him. And that one too. Emma watched as William Montgomery was dragged away in chains. He was still protesting, still threatening, still promising retribution. But there was fear in his eyes now. Real fear. Harry crashed into Emma, wrapping his arms around her waist. You came for me, he said, his voice muffled against her dress. You really came. Of course I came. Emma held him tight. I promised I'd keep you safe, didn't I? But you could have been hurt. The bad man could have. Shh. Emma knelt down to meet his eyes. Do you know why I came, Harry? Even though it was dangerous, Harry shook his head. Because that's what family does. Emma touched his face gently. We don't leave each other behind. Ever. Harry's eyes widened. Family. If you'll have me. The smile that spread across Harry's face was brighter than the moon. Papa, he shouted. Miss Emma says we're family. She says she's not leaving. Sam appeared beside them. His clothes were torn. There was blood on his hands. Exhaustion lined every feature of his face. He'd never looked more beautiful to Emma. That's so, he asked quietly. If you'll have me, Emma repeated. Sam looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and pulled her into his arms. I'll have you, he said against her hair. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you'll stay. Emma buried her face in his chest and let herself believe it. For the first time in her life, she let herself believe that this could be real. The ride back to town was slow but triumphant. News had spread fast. By the time their small procession reached Silver Creek, it seemed like half the population had turned out to watch William Montgomery be led to jail. Emma kept her head high, but she felt every stare, every whisper. Then something unexpected happened. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward from the crowd. Miss Hartwell, her voice carried across the street. I believe I owe you an apology. Emma blinked. Ma'am, I judged you unfairly when you arrived. Assume the worst. Sarah's expression was firm but sincere. I was wrong. A woman who risks her life to save a child she's known 2 weeks, that's not a schemer. That's someone with a good heart. A murmur went through the crowd. Then one by one other voices joined in. She's right. I heard what happened. Montgomery kidnapped the boy. My cousin in Denver said Montgomery swindled her sister out of $200. Man's been a snake for years. Good riddance. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. She wasn't accepted. Not yet. Not fully. But the tide was turning. Sam's hand found hers in the darkness. Told you, he said quietly. This town comes around eventually. Eventually, Emma echoed. I can work with eventually. They took Harry home and put him to bed. The boy fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from his ordeal. But safe, whole, alive. Emma sat beside his bed for a long time, watching him breathe. He's okay. Sam's voice came from the doorway. Kids are resilient. He shouldn't have to be resilient. He's 7 years old. I know. Sam moved to stand beside her. But he's got you now. He's got both of us. Emma looked up at him. What happens next? Trial, probably. Sheriff says they've been collecting evidence against Montgomery for months. With what happened tonight, plus testimony from the other women he swindled. Sam shrugged. He's going away for a long time. And us? Sam was quiet for a moment. What do you want to happen? It was the first time anyone had ever asked her that question. Not what she needed. Not what she should do. What she wanted. I want to stay, Emma said. I want to be part of this family. For real. Not just as a housekeeper. She paused, gathering courage. I want to stop being afraid. Of wanting things. Of hoping for things. Of letting myself believe that good things can last. Sam knelt beside her, his face level with hers. Then stay, he said simply. Be part of this family. Stop being afraid. He took her hand. And let me prove to you that good things can last. Give me a chance to prove it. Emma's eyes filled with tears. It's too soon. We barely know each other. So we'll learn. Sam's thumb stroked across her knuckles. We've got time. Did they after everything that had happened? After all the chaos and fear and violence? Could they really just have time? I don't know how to do this, Emma admitted. I've never had someone who wanted to stay. Who wanted me to stay. I don't know how to trust it. Then don't trust it. Sam's voice was gentle. Trust me. One day at a time, one moment at a time, and when you're ready to believe, I'll still be here. Emma looked at this man, this gruff, grieving cowboy who'd offered her shelter when she had nothing, who'd defended her against a town full of gossips, who'd risked his life to save his son and hers. One day at a time, she repeated. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. Okay, she whispered. Okay. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a declaration. But it was a start. And sometimes Emma was learning a start was enough. The trial was set for 2 weeks later. Emma spent those 14 days in a state of suspended animation. She cooked. She cleaned. She cared for Harry. She went through all the motions of daily life while her mind circled endlessly around the same terrifying thought. She would have to stand in front of the whole town and tell her story, every shameful detail, every desperate choice, every moment of weakness that had led her to answer a stranger's advertisement and board a train to nowhere. You're going to wear a hole in that floor. Imam looked up. Sam stood in the kitchen doorway, watching her pace with an expression that was half concern, half amusement. I can't help it, she said. Every time I try to sit still, I start thinking about the trial. And then I start thinking about what people will say. And then you pace. Sam crossed the room and took her hands, forcing her to stop moving. Emma, look at me. She looked. You're not alone in this, he said. I'll be there. Harry will be there. Sheriff Blake says 4 other women are coming to testify. You're not fighting this battle by yourself. I know. I know that, but Sam... Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. What if it's not enough? What if William's lawyer twists everything around and makes me look like the villain? What if the jury believes him instead of me? Then we deal with it. Sam's grip tightened. Together. Whatever happens, we deal with it together. Emma wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But she'd spent too many years learning that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. What if they find him innocent, she asked. What happens to us then? Sam's jaw tightened. He won't be innocent. But what if Emma? Sam's voice was firm. Stop borrowing trouble. We've got enough real problems without inventing new ones. She knew he was right, but knowing and feeling were 2 different things. I'm scared, she admitted. I've faced down drunks and factory bosses and landlords who wanted to throw me on the street. I've survived things that should have broken me. But this? Oh, she shook her head. Standing up in front of all those people telling them my story, letting them judge me. I don't know if I can solve it. Yes, you can. Sam's voice was absolute. You know how I know? How? Because you threw a rock at William Montgomery's head to save my son. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. A woman who can do that can do anything. Despite everything, Emma laughed. It was a small sound, broken and uncertain, but it was real. I was terrified when I threw that rock, she admitted. Bravery ain't about not being scared. Sam released her hands and cupped her face instead. It's about being scared and doing the hard thing anyway. And Emma Grace Hartwell, you are the bravest woman I've ever known. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Even braver than Kate. The question slipped out before she could stop it. She saw Sam flinch, saw the flash of pain cross his features. Sorry, she said quickly. I shouldn't have. Kate was brave in her own way, Sam said quietly. She built a life out here when everyone told her she'd fail. She raised Harry to be kind and strong. She faced death with more grace than I'll ever have. He paused. But you've been fighting your whole life. Alone with no one to lean on, no one to catch you when you fell. That takes a different kind of courage. Amma did not know what to say. Don't compare yourself to her, Sam continued. Don't try to be her. Just be you. That's more than enough. The tears spilled over. Mama couldn't stop them. Sam pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray. Emma, dressed in her best dress, the blue cotton she'd arrived in now, clean and pressed, within an inch of its life. She pinned her hair up carefully, checked her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser, and tried to recognize the woman staring back at her. She looked different, not softer exactly, but something had changed in her eyes. Something had opened up that had been closed for a very long time. Miss Emma, Harry's voice came from the doorway. Papa says it's time to go. Emma took a deep breath. I'm coming. The ride to town was quiet. Harry sat between Emma and Sam on the wagon bench, his small hand wrapped around hers. He hadn't let go of her since they'd left the house. Are you scared? He asked. A little, Emma admitted. Papa says it's okay to be scared as long as you don't let it stop you from doing the right thing. Your papa's a wise man. That's what Mama used to say. Harry paused. She also said Papa was stubborn as a mule and twice as hard-headed, but she always smiled when she said it. Emma felt Sam stiffen beside her. Your mama was right about both things, Sam said gruffly. Now hush up. We're almost there. The town was crowded when they arrived. Word of the trial had spread across the territory, and it seemed like half of Wyoming had turned out to watch. Emma felt their eyes on her as she climbed down from the wagon. Heard the whispers. That's her, the mail-order bride. Heard she threw a rock at Montgomery's head. Knocked him clean out. Don't look so tough to me. Sam's hand found the small of her back, steadying her. Ignore them, he murmured. Just keep walking. Emma kept walking. The courthouse was a modest building, barely bigger than the general store. But today it felt enormous. Today it felt like the entire weight of Emma's future was pressing down on its wooden walls. Sheriff Blake met them at the door. Miss Hartwell, Sam. He nodded to them both. The prosecutor wants to speak with you before we start. Just to go over your testimony one more time. Is that necessary? Sam asked. She's been over it 100 times already. It's fine. Emma straightened her spine. I want to be prepared. The sheriff led her to a small room at the back of the courthouse. A young man in a rumpled suit was waiting inside papers spread across a battered desk. Miss Hartwell, he stood and offered his hand. I'm Robert Hayes. I'll be prosecuting Mr. Montgomery today. Emma shook his hand. His palm was sweaty. You're nervous, she said. Hayes blinked. Excuse me? Your hand is sweating. You keep shuffling those papers. And you've got a twitch in your left eye. Emma tilted her head. How many trials have you prosecuted, Mr. Hayes? The young lawyer's face reddened. This is my first. Emma's stomach dropped. Your first? Yes, ma'am, but I've studied extensively, and I'm confident. William Montgomery has ruined at least 4 women's lives. Emma interrupted. He kidnapped a 7-year-old boy. He threatened to burn down a family's home. And the territory sends a lawyer who's never tried a case. I understand your concern, but do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like nobody expects us to win. Hayes's jaw tightened. For a moment, Emma saw something flash in his eyes. Something harder than the nervous young man he'd appeared to be. Miss Hartwell, he said quietly, I volunteered for this case. The senior prosecutors wanted nothing to do with it. They said Montgomery had too much money, too many connections, too much power. He paused. I took it because I believe you deserve justice, because those other women deserve justice, and because if nobody's willing to fight for the people who need it most, then what's the point of having laws at all? Emma studied him for a long moment. All right, Mr. Hayes, she said finally, let's make sure we win. The trial began at 10 o'clock. Emma sat in the front row of the gallery, Sam on one side of her and Harry on the other. Behind them, the courthouse was packed with spectators. Farmers and ranchers, shopkeepers and their wives. People who traveled miles to witness what everyone was calling the trial of the decade. William Montgomery sat at the defense table looking impeccably groomed in an expensive suit. His lawyer, a silver-haired man named Charles Winters, radiated confidence. Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to hide the trembling. Judge Harrison called the court to order. The territory of Wyoming versus William Montgomery, he announced. Charges include fraud, breach of promise, kidnapping, and assault. Mr. Hayes, you may proceed with your opening statement. Robert Hayes rose from his chair. His hands weren't shaking anymore. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began. What I'm about to tell you is not a complicated story. It's not a story of misunderstandings or accidents or good intentions gone wrong. It's a story of a predator, a man who deliberately, systematically, cruelly targeted vulnerable women for his own profit. He walked slowly past the jury box, making eye contact with each member. William Montgomery presents himself as a gentleman, a businessman, a respectable member of society. Hayes's voice hardened. But behind that mask is something much darker. A man who advertises for wives he never intends to marry, who takes their money, their hope, their dignity, who abandons them in strange towns with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Emma watched the jury's faces. Some looked skeptical, others looked curious. A few, mostly women, looked angry. Over the next few days, you will hear from 4 women who answered William Montgomery's advertisements. Hayes continued, 4 women who traveled hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles to marry a man who never intended to show up. 4 women whose lives were destroyed by his lies. He paused, letting the words sink in. You will also hear how Mr. Montgomery kidnapped a 7-year-old boy named Harry Crawford, how he dragged that child from his bed in the middle of the night and held him hostage in an abandoned cabin, how he threatened to burn down the Crawford ranch if Emma Hartwell, one of his victims, didn't submit to his demands. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The defense will try to tell you this is a misunderstanding, Hayes said, that these women are lying, that Mr. Montgomery is the real victim here. His voice dropped. Don't believe them. Listen to the evidence. Listen to the witnesses. And then ask yourselves, what kind of man does these things, and what kind of society lets him get away with it? He returned to his seat. Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Charles Winters rose for the defense. A compelling performance, Mr. Hayes, he said smoothly. Truly moving, but that's all it was, a performance. Because the facts of this case tell a very different story. Where Winters strolled toward the jury with the casual confidence of a man who'd won 100 trials. William Montgomery is a successful businessman who made the mistake of trusting the wrong people. He advertised for a wife perfectly legal and corresponded with Miss Hartwell, also perfectly legal. When business complications forced him to delay meeting her train, Miss Hartwell made other arrangements. Winters shrugged. That's not fraud. That's a scheduling conflict. Emma's fist clenched. As for the so-called kidnapping, Winters continued, Mr. Montgomery went to the Crawford Ranch to discuss the situation with Miss Hartwell. Things got heated. The child wandered off in the confusion and was found a short time later unharmed. He spread his hands. Hardly the dramatic crime Mr. Hayes described. The boy was tied up, someone shouted from the gallery. Order, Judge Harrison banged his gavel. One more outburst and I'll clear this courtroom. Winters smiled thinly. As I was saying, this case is not about a predator and his victims. It's about a successful man being attacked by bitter women who failed to secure the marriages they wanted. It's about jealousy, about revenge, about destroying someone's reputation because they didn't live up to unrealistic expectations. He looked directly at Emma. Don't be fooled by tears and accusations. Look at the evidence, and you'll see that William Montgomery is innocent of these ridiculous charges. He sat down. Emma felt sick. The first witness was Ruth Montgomery, not Montgomery by blood, by bitter irony. She'd actually managed to marry William before discovering what he really was. She was a thin woman in her early 30s with haunted eyes and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Mrs. Montgomery, Hayes began gently, can you tell the court how you met the defendant? Ruth's voice was barely above a whisper. I answered his advertisement in a Boston newspaper. He wrote such beautiful letters, made so many promises. What happened when you arrived in Wyoming? He was there. Ruth's jaw tightened. Unlike the others, he actually showed up for me. We were married within a week. And after the wedding, silence stretched through the courtroom. He took my money, Ruth said finally. Everything I brought with me, said he needed it for the ranch. Then he started controlling things. What I ate, what I wore, who I talked to. Did he ever hurt you physically? Ruth pulled back her sleeve. Even from across the room, Emma could see the scars. Thick, white, old. A gasp rippled through the gallery. He did this with a fireplace poker, Ruth said, because I burned the biscuits. She looked at William for the first time. I ran away after 3 months, didn't take anything, just ran. He found me, of course, dragged me back, told me if I ever tried to leave again, he'd kill me. Her voice cracked. I believed him. How did you finally escape? He got tired of me, found a new woman to prey on, told me I was worthless, that no one would ever believe me if I talked, and threw me out on the street. She looked at William. I've been waiting 4 years for this day. Charles Winters' cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Montgomery, if that's even your real name, isn't it true that you have a history of mental instability? Objection. Hayes was on his feet. I'll allow it, Judge Harrison said. Answer the question. Ruth's face paled. I saw a doctor once. After William. After what he did to me. A doctor at a sanitarium. Correct, because you had a nervous breakdown. Because my husband beat me until I couldn't remember my own name. So you admit your memory is unreliable. That's not what I said. No further questions. The second witness was Mary Collins from Denver. Then Sarah Brennan from Cheyenne. When Sarah took the stand, Sarah Mitchell stood from the gallery. She's my niece, Your Honor. My sister's daughter. A gasp went through the courtroom. Emma felt Sam's hand tighten on hers. This was it. This was the connection Sarah Mitchell had warned her about. William Montgomery had hurt Sarah Mitchell's own family. The tide was turning. The fourth witness was Elizabeth Hart from Santa Fe. She was visibly pregnant, and her voice shook as she told her story. How she'd arrived pregnant and desperate. How William had promised to raise the child as his own. How he'd thrown her out when the baby was born stillborn. He said I was damaged goods, Elizabeth whispered. That no one would ever want me. That I should be grateful he'd taken pity on me at all. When Winters tried to cross-examine her, Judge Harrison held up a hand. I think we've heard enough, Mr. Winters. Next witness. By the end of the first day, Emma was exhausted. He's destroying them, she said to Sam as they walked to the wagon. Every single witness. He's ripping them apart. What chance do I have? You have the truth. The truth isn't enough. You heard Winters. He's twisting everything, making the women look crazy or desperate or dishonest. Emma. Sam stopped walking and turned to face her. You're not like those other women. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've got something they don't. You've got me. You've got Harry. You've got the whole damn story of what happened at that cabin, including the part where Montgomery's men tied up my son. Sam's voice hardened. Winters can't explain that away. He can't make kidnapping look like a misunderstanding. And you've got something else. Sam's eyes held hers. You've got fire. I've seen it. When you're backed into a corner, you don't crumble. You fight. Emma wanted to believe him. What if I'm not strong enough? You threw a rock at a man's head to save a child you'd known 2 weeks. Sam's voice softened. You're strong enough. Emma took a deep breath. Okay, tomorrow. I'll be ready. Emma's testimony began at 9 o'clock the next morning. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, her heart pounding, and her hands steady for the first time in days. Please state your name for the record, Hayes said. Emma Grace Hartwell. Miss Hartwell, how did you come to be in Silver Creek, Wyoming? Emma told her story from the beginning. The advertisement, the letters, the borrowed money for the train, the empty platform, the humiliation at the general store. She told them about Sam's offer of employment, about Harry's mistake at the station, about William's first appearance at the ranch and his threats, and then she told them about the kidnapping. I woke to Harry's scream, Emma said. By the time I got to his room, he was gone. The window was open. There were boot prints in the snow. What did you do? Sam went after them on horseback. He told me to ride to town for help. Emma paused. I didn't. A murmur went through the courtroom. Why not? Because Harry was taken to get to me. It was my fault he was in danger. I couldn't just sit there and wait while someone else fixed my problem. So what did you do? Emma met with William's eyes across the courtroom. I followed the tracks to an abandoned cabin. I climbed through a broken window, and I found Harry tied to a chair with William Montgomery standing over him. What happened next? I threw a rock at his head. Someone in the gallery laughed. Judge Harrison gavelled for order. And then I untied Harry and told him to run. Sam arrived with Sheriff Blake shortly after. They arrested William and his men. Hayes nodded. No further questions. Charles Winters stood slowly buttoning his jacket. Miss Hartwell, an emotional story, but I have some questions about the details. Emma's stomach tightened. You say you followed tracks in the dark and snow, with no experience tracking? Yes. And you climbed through a broken window silently. No one heard you coming. The guard was distracted. Winters smiled thinly. Convenient. You also claim my client was standing over the boy when you arrived. What was he doing exactly talking to him? Talking. Not threatening, not hurting, just talking. Emma's jaw tightened. He'd kidnapped a 7-year-old child. Allegedly, Winters raised an eyebrow. Miss Hartwell, isn't it possible that you misinterpreted the situation, that my client was simply trying to negotiate with Mr. Crawford about your living arrangements? By dragging a child from his bed in the middle of the night. Children wander. Perhaps Harry left on his own and my client found him. He was tied to a chair. The words exploded from Emma before she could stop them. The courtroom went silent. Emma's whole body was shaking. But she didn't care anymore, didn't care about staying calm, about being dignified, about any of the things Hayes had coached her on. William Montgomery kidnapped a 7-year-old boy, she said, her voice low and fierce. He tied that child to a chair in an abandoned cabin and used him as bait to trap me. He sent men to threaten burning down the Crawford Ranch. He told me I was his property, that no one would believe me, that he would destroy my life if I didn't submit to him. She stood up in the witness box. I am not crazy. I am not lying. I am not a gold digger or a schemer or any of the other things you've implied. I am a woman who answered an advertisement because I had nowhere else to go, and I was preyed upon by a monster. Emma pointed directly at William. That man has hurt at least 5 women that we know of. How many more are out there? How many more women has he destroyed who were too scared or too ashamed to come forward? Her voice broke. I am terrified standing here. I am humiliated having my life picked apart in front of strangers. But I would stand here 1,000 times if it meant stopping him from hurting anyone else. Emma sat back down, her legs trembling. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Then from the gallery, someone started to clap. One person, then 2, then 10. Then the whole room was applauding despite Judge Harrison's furious attempts to restore order. Through the chaos, Emma met Sam's eyes. He was smiling. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Emma waited in the small room at the back of the courthouse, unable to eat, unable to sit still, unable to do anything but pace and pray. Sam stayed with her. So did Harry. What if they find him innocent? Harry asked for the 100th time. Then we'll figure something out, Emma said. Together. But Harry, Sam's voice was gentle. Whatever happens, we're still a family. That doesn't change. The boy nodded, but his face was tight with worry. At 4 o'clock, the bailiff came to fetch them. Jury's back. Emma's heart stopped. She walked back into the courtroom on legs that felt like water. The gallery was packed even tighter than before. Word had spread that a verdict was coming. William sat at the defense table, his face carefully blank. But Emma saw his hands. They were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Harrison asked. The foreman, a weathered rancher Emma didn't recognize, stood. We have your honor. On the charge of fraud, how do you find guilty? A gasp swept through the courtroom. On the charge of breach of promise, guilty. On the charge of kidnapping, guilty. Emma's knees buckled. Sam caught her arm, steadying her. On the charge of assault, guilty. William's mask finally cracked, his face contorted with rage. This is a farce, he shouted. These women are liars. I'll appeal. Remove the defendant, Judge Harrison ordered. 2 bailiffs grabbed William and dragged him toward the door. As he passed Emma, he lunged toward her. This isn't over, he hissed. I'll get out, and when I do... Get him out, Sam roared. The bailiffs hauled William through the door. His screams echoed down the hallway, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Emma stood in the middle of the courtroom, surrounded by cheering spectators, and felt something she'd never felt before. Victory. Real, genuine, hard-won victory. Sam's arms came around her from behind. You did it, he murmured against her hair. You won. Emma turned in his embrace to face him. We won, she corrected. All of us. Harry squeezed between them, wrapping his arms around both their waists. Does this mean the bad man's going away forever? For a very long time, Sam confirmed. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Harry's face split into a grin. Can we celebrate? Can we get candy? Mama always said candy was for celebrations. Emma laughed. A real laugh, full of joy and relief, in something that felt dangerously like hope. I think candy sounds perfect, she said. They walked out of the courthouse together, the 3 of them, into a crowd of people who for the first time weren't looking at Emma with suspicion or judgment. They were looking at her with respect. Sarah Mitchell pushed through the crowd. "Miss Hartwell." Her voice was gruff, but her eyes were warm. "That was one hell of a testimony." "Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell." "Sarah." The older woman almost smiled. "After what you did, I reckon you've earned the right to call me Sarah." It wasn't much, a first name, a small gesture of acceptance. But to Emma, it felt like the whole world had shifted on its axis. She was no longer the mail-order bride who'd been abandoned at the station. She was Emma Grace Hartwell, survivor, fighter, winner, and she was finally home. 1 week later, William Montgomery was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. No parole, no appeal. Judge Harrison had been merciless, citing the calculated cruelty of his crimes and the need to send a message to other men who might prey on vulnerable women. Emma had watched them lead him away in chains, his expensive suit rumpled, his perfect hair disheveled, his face twisted with impotent rage. She'd felt nothing, not satisfaction, not triumph, not even relief, just emptiness, as if a weight she'd been carrying for so long had finally lifted, and now she didn't know what to do with the space it left behind. 2 weeks after the trial, on a Sunday afternoon, when the winter sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, Sam found Emma on the porch. She was watching the snow melt off the eastern hills, lost in thought. "Been looking for you," he said. Emma turned. Sam stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, his expression nervous in a way she'd never seen before. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. He took a breath. "I need to ask you something." Emma's heart started pounding. Sam stepped onto the porch and took her hands. "These past 3 months," he said, "you've brought life back into this house." Harry laughs again. Really laughs, not just pretends. "And me. I wake up and there's a reason to get out of bed besides duty." His voice roughened. "You did that. You." "Sam, I know it's only been 3 months since you arrived," he continued. "I know we're still learning each other, but I also know what I feel, and I know what I want." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple gold band. No stone, just smooth, worn gold that caught the sunlight. "This was Kate's wedding ring," Sam said. "Before she died, she made me promise something. She said, 'Don't be alone, Dan. Don't let grief make you hard. Find someone who makes you laugh again. Find someone who'll love Harry like I did.'" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Emma Grace Hartwell, you are the bravest, strongest, most stubborn woman I've ever known. You threw a rock at a man's head to save my son. You stood in a courtroom and faced down your demons. You chose us when you could have run." He paused. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Harry's mother, and build a life with us?" Emma couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face. Finally, she whispered, "Yes, yes, yes." Sam slipped the ring on her finger. It was a perfect fit, because she and Kate were the same size, the same build, the same heart. Sam kissed her, soft at first, then deeper. Years of loneliness and grief and hope pouring into that kiss. Harry's whoop from inside the house shattered the moment. "They're getting married, Papa and Miss Emma are getting married." He burst through the door, face alight with joy. "Can I be in the wedding? Can I?" Billy Henderson's brother got to hold the rings when his pa remarried. Emma and Sam laughed, pulling Harry into their embrace. Their family. Whole at last. The wedding was small. Emma had insisted on that. After everything that had happened, she didn't want spectacle. She wanted simplicity, authenticity, something real. They held it at the ranch in the front room, where Emma had first started to feel like she belonged. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony. Harry stood beside them as a ring bearer, practically vibrating with excitement. The guest list was modest. Sheriff Blake and his wife, Robert Hayes, Sarah Mitchell, Doc Hartley, a handful of neighbors who'd become friends in the months since the trial, Ruth Montgomery, who traveled from Boston, Mary Collins from Denver, Sarah Brennan from Cheyenne with her Aunt Sarah Mitchell beaming with pride, and Elizabeth Hart from Santa Fe, no longer pregnant, but stronger somehow. Emma wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple blue cotton with white lace at the collar. Not fancy, not expensive, but it was hers, made with her own hands, and that mattered more than silk or satin ever could. "You look beautiful," Sam said when he saw her. "You're supposed to say that." I'm saying it because it's true. He took her hands. You ready? Emma looked around the room, at the people who'd gathered to witness this moment, at Harry, who couldn't stop grinning, at Sam, whose eyes held nothing but love and hope and the promise of a future she'd never dared to dream about. I've been ready my whole life, she said. I just didn't know it. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows spoken simply without embellishment. Do you, Daniel Crawford, take Emma Grace Hartwell to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Emma Grace Hartwell, take Daniel Crawford to be your lawfully wedded husband? Emma thought about her mother who died believing her daughter would never find happiness. Thought about the factory in Massachusetts where she'd worked her fingers raw, dreaming of something better. Thought about the train platform in Silver Creek where she'd stood alone and terrified with nothing but a broken suitcase and fading hope. I do, she said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Matthews smiled. You may kiss the bride. Sam kissed her, and the small crowd erupted in applause. Harry squeezed between them, wrapping his arms around both their waists. Does this mean I can call you Mama now? For real. Emma's eyes filled with tears. For real, sweetheart. Forever and always. Best day ever. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Sarah Mitchell had baked a cake. The neighbors had brought food. Someone produced a fiddle, and before long, the furniture had been pushed back and people were dancing in the front room. Emma watched from the edge of the crowd, still not quite believing this was her life now. You're not dancing, she turned to find Sam beside her. Neither are you. I'm waiting for my wife. He held out his hand. May I have this dance, Mrs. Crawford? Mrs. Crawford, the name wrapped around her like a warm blanket. I don't really know how to dance, Emma admitted. Neither do I. Sam pulled her close. We'll figure it out together. They swayed in each other's arms, not really dancing, just holding on. Around them, the party continued. Laughter, music, the sound of a community celebrating something good. Thank you, Emma whispered. For what? For seeing me. When everyone else looked at me and saw a problem or a scandal or a cautionary tale, you saw me. Sam's arms tightened around her. How could I not? You're the most real person I've ever known. No pretense, no games, just you. Honest and brave and stronger than you know. Emma thought about that. About all the moments when she'd wanted to run and hadn't. When she'd wanted to hide and stood her ground instead. When she'd wanted to give up and found one more reason to keep fighting. Maybe Sam was right. Maybe she was braver than she'd ever realized. I want to build something here, she said. Something real. Something that lasts. We will. Sam's voice was a promise. Together. 6 months later, on a bright June morning, Doc Hartley came to the ranch with news. Emma was in the garden when he arrived, planting the vegetables Kate used to grow. Tomatoes, beans, squash, and along the fence the flowers Kate had loved. Sunflowers, daisies, wild roses. It felt right somehow, honoring the woman who'd come before while building something new. Mrs. Crawford, Doc Hartley called from the porch. Emma stood brushing dirt from her hands. Sam around? In the barn. Should I fetch him? Might want to. This concerns both of you. Emma's stomach tightened. Is something wrong? Doc Hartley smiled. Depends on how you look at it, but I'd say no. Nothing wrong at all. Sam came in from the barn, wiping grease from his hands. Harry trailed behind him, chattering about the new calf that had been born that morning. Doc, Sam nodded. What brings you out? Wanted to confirm something, Doc Hartley said. He looked at Emma. You've been feeling poorly in the mornings, haven't you? Emma's hand went to her stomach. She'd noticed the nausea, the exhaustion, but she'd attributed it to the change in seasons, to the hard work of running a household. A little, she admitted. Doc Hartley's smile widened. That's what I thought. Congratulations, Mrs. Crawford. You're about 3 months along. Emma's knees went weak. Sam caught her elbow. Pregnant, she whispered. I'm pregnant. Her mind raced. 3 months. That meant she'd gotten pregnant right after the wedding. Right when they were happiest. Right when the fear and stress and terror had finally lifted and they'd allowed themselves to just be happy. We're having a baby, Sam said, wonder in his voice. Harry let out a whoop that probably scared every bird in the county. That night after Harry was asleep, Sam found Emma in the garden. She was sitting on the bench Kate had built years ago, her hand on her still flat stomach, staring up at the stars. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm perfect." Emma's voice was thick with tears. "I'm terrified and overwhelmed and so happy. Is that possible to feel all of that at once?" Sam sat beside her and pulled her close. "With you, anything's possible." They sat in comfortable silence listening to the night sounds. Crickets, the distant call of an owl, the wind through the cottonwoods down by the creek. "I never thought I could have this," Emma said finally. "Any of this. A husband who loves me, a son who calls me mama, a home, a community." She paused. "And now a baby." She looked at Sam. "Do you realize I got pregnant right after the wedding? Right when we were happiest. Not during the trial, not during all that stress and fear, but after, when we finally had peace." Sam's arms tightened around her. "New beginnings. You deserve all of it," he said, "and more." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "Kate would have been a good grandmother." "Yeah," Sam's voice was rough. "She would have." "Do you think she knows somehow?" Sam was quiet for a long moment. "I think she's watching over all of us. Every day. And I think she's happy." The baby came in early December, almost exactly 2 years after Emma had first stepped off that train in Silver Creek. A girl. Strong and healthy, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, they named her Elizabeth. Beth for short, after Elizabeth Hart, the woman who testified at the trial despite everything she'd lost. Honoring a woman who'd found the courage to speak truth. Harry, now 9 years old, was beside himself with joy. He appointed himself as his sister's official protector and spent hours by her cradle telling her stories about the ranch, about their parents, about the brave woman she was named after. "She's so tiny," he said one evening, watching his sister sleep. "Was I that tiny when I was born?" "Tinier," Emma said, settling beside him. "Your papa says you were the smallest baby in the territory." Harry puffed up with pride. "And now I'm almost 10, and I'm the tallest kid in Sunday school." He leaned against Emma's shoulder. "Mama." "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for coming here, for staying, for being my mama." He paused. "I know you didn't plan it. I know everything went wrong at first, but I'm glad it went wrong, because if it hadn't, you might have married that bad man, and then you wouldn't be here with us." Emma's throat tightened. "I'm glad too, sweetheart. So glad. Do you think my first mama knows about Beth and you and everything?" Emma thought about Kate, the woman she'd never met but had come to love. Through the stories Harry told, through the recipes in the kitchen, through the flowers in the garden. "I think she knows," Emma said. "I think she's watching over all of us every day, and I think she's happy." Harry nodded seriously. Then he grinned. "I'm going to teach Beth how to ride a horse, and how to throw rocks, and how to climb trees, and maybe start with how to hold her head up first." Emma laughed. "Yeah, okay." Harry kissed his sister's forehead gently. "But then I'm teaching her everything." Emma watched her children, both of them, because Harry was hers in every way that mattered, and felt peace settle into her bones. This was what happiness felt like. This was what home meant. Not a place, but a belonging, a choosing, a fierce, stubborn love that refused to let go no matter how hard life tried to tear it apart. Now, on a cold November afternoon in 1953, Daniel Crawford finished his story. His grandson Jacob sat silent beside him, processing everything he'd heard. "What happened to Grandma Emma?" Jacob asked softly. Dan's eyes were distant. "She lived to see her great-grandchildren. Died peacefully at 83. Her heart just stopped one morning while she was working in the garden. Kate's garden. The one Emma replanted that first spring." He paused. 56 years we had together. 56 years of mornings waking up beside her. 56 years of watching her tend that garden. 56 years of her being the bravest, most stubborn, most loving woman I ever knew. "And you never remarried again?" Dan shook his head. "Two great loves in one lifetime is more than most men get. Kate taught me how to love. Emma taught me how to live again. They're both still with me. Every day." A truck pulled into the yard. Harry Crawford, now 65 years old, climbed out. Behind him, his children and grandchildren spilled from the vehicle. Still moving with energy, despite his years, still had that same eager smile he'd worn as a boy. Another car arrived. Beth Crawford Martinez, 61, emerged with her family, including a great-granddaughter 5 years old with auburn hair and green eyes. Harry reached the porch first. Dad, he embraced his father carefully. You telling Jake the story? Figured he should know where he comes from before he ships out. Beth arrived with the little girl. Tell me about great-grandma Emma Grandpa, the child demanded, climbing onto Dan's lap. Dan looked around. 4 generations gathered on the same porch where Emma had first seen the house that would become home, where Kate had planted her garden, where he'd proposed to Emma on a winter afternoon 56 years ago. Your great-grandma Emma was the bravest woman I ever knew, he said. Want to know how brave? The little girl's eyes went wide. How brave? She threw a rock at a bad man's head to save my life. Really? Beth pulled out a small wooden box. She opened it carefully. Inside were 2 gold bands, Kate's ring, the one Emma had worn for 56 years, and Emma's ring, the one Dan had given her on their 10th anniversary. Grandma Emma wanted these passed down, Beth said to Jake. She said, give them to someone deploying to protect others. Said courage runs in this family, and these rings are proof. She handed Jake a small leather journal. Emma's handwriting filled the pages. Her own recipe book started after Kate's. But instead of just recipes, it was filled with stories. Stories of courage, survival, second chances. Jake opened to the final entry dated a week before Emma died. To whoever reads this, if you're lost, if you're scared, if you think you'll never find home, remember that home isn't a place. It's choosing to stay when you could run. It's loving people who need you even when it terrifies you. It's believing you deserve good things even when the world says you don't. I came to Wyoming with nothing. I left with everything in him, not because someone gave it to me, because I claimed it for myself. Jake touched the rings, the journal. I'll keep them safe, Grandpa, I promise, and I'll protect people who need it, just like she did. Dan's eyes filled with tears. That's all she ever asked, that the legacy continue. The camera of memory pulled back from the porch, 5 generations of photos visible through the window. Emma's original daguerreotype from 1807 in the center, each generation radiating outward, all connected by her courage. Dan's voice, aged but strong, echoed in the winter air. They said no one was coming for her that day on the platform. They were wrong. She came for herself. And in doing so, she saved us all. The wind picked up, rattling the barn door Dan still hadn't fixed. Some things you carry forever, some things you pass on, and some things like love and courage and the stubborn refusal to give up, they echo through generations long after the original voice has gone silent. Jacob Crawford stood, straightening his Marine uniform. In 48 hours, he'd be on a ship to Korea. But right now, he was home, standing on a porch built by his great-great-grandfather, wearing rings blessed by his great-grandmother, carrying a story that would stay with him through whatever came next. Because that's what family does. They tell the stories. They pass down the courage. They remind each other that even when you're alone and terrified and certain you'll never survive, you might be one train ride away from home. You just have to be brave enough to take it.